Many Georgians view Stone Mountain as a massive amusement park, a place where they can take their kids to the dinosaurium, or slide down Snow Mountain, or visit an antebellum plantation house, or take a look at Memorial Hall and step outside to gaze at the largest Confederate memorial ever created. At least, that's what the park wants you to think, because all of this is behind the paywall. And the managers of the property, Stone Mountain Memorial Association and Thrive Entertainment, need your cash.
Behind this facade is a history of titanic resource extraction, enabled by the black residents of nearby Shermantown and exploited by the Venable family, founders of the second Ku Klux Klan and one of the most powerful Atlanteans of the 19th and 20th centuries. This dynamic is plastered with constant political and media corruption and Klan intimidation, designed to sustain the socioeconomic position of Stone Mountain's black workers at the expense of the surrounding community's development, a legacy of extraction that continues today.
The time has come for the black residents of Stone Mountain, Georgia, to have greater control over how Stone Mountain Park is run.
The history of the Venable family is a history of feudalism and enslavement, dating as far back as the 17th century, when James Venable, a baron who inherited 8 manors in southern England, was described by his neighbor as an enemy to Reformation and a tyrant among his tenants. In the 18th century, his descendants first moved to Virginia and then Georgia, where they enjoyed high social status and owned slaves. Brothers William and Samuel Venable, founders of the Southern Granite Corporation, were born into one of these slave-owning households, and their family's historical position creeps into their rhetoric and the broadening utilization of black labor within their company. A year after the Venable brothers secured total ownership of the mountain, a strike erupted. According to Samuel Venable, the organizers, Scotchmen, were out of prejudice and self-interest protesting the employment of non-union blacks in his quarries as stonecutters, a profession considered more skilled than the drilling blacks normally did. Venable thought that the Scottish aliens, who siphoned all of their money back to the old country, feared the blacks, who worked better than they did, would injure their business. According to the union itself, this could not be further from the truth. The strike was motivated by a 20% wage reduction over the course of 4 months, and their union was composed of several demographics, including colored people, tarnishing Venable's portrayal of a binary between Southern blacks and a foreign antagonist. The key here is Venable's implication of a sort of paternalistic dynamic between his company and his black workers, remarking that though he gets them some cheaper, he provides them with houses, beds, and so forth, solidifying their dependence on him. Throughout this whole statement, he postures as the guardian of their interests against the union and a firm advocate of their talents in a prejudiced society.
This patronage also appears in the history of Shermantown, a community where freed blacks congregated in search of work and a place to legally reside. The Venable brothers owned great swaths of property there and donated stone to build the Bethsaida Baptist Church, which still stands today. They allowed residents to fish and saw trees on their land for free and even held community barbecues. They also made a point of protecting Shermantown from the second coming of the Ku Klux Klan, which was largely enabled by Samuel Venable himself, who granted the Klan the right to use Stone Mountain as a place for rallies, cementing it as a landmark of white supremacy. However, every Labor Day, the streets of Shermantown would fill with dread when the KKK would walk through chanting racial slurs, and the black citizens were forced to turn off lights and close down shops in order to hide because their life was on the line. In this way, the Klan and the Venables could silence the black vote and sustain power through intimidation and political influence without provoking community members to action.
This lack of black political power had negative implications for the history of Stone Mountain as a whole.
In 1896, when it was proposed that the new DeKalb County Courthouse be built non-Decatur but in Stone Mountain, rendering Stone Mountain County seat and bringing it great prosperity, Decatur struck back with the proposition that instead of the customary 2/3 of the votes delivered, 2/3 of eligible voters in the community would be required to vote in Stone Mountain's favor.
In this way, Decatur leveraged disenfranchisement over Stone Mountain, which had a large black population that was nominally enfranchised but prevented from actually voting by Jim Crow.
Even though Stone Mountain was right beside billions of tons of building materials, had a larger population, and received 814 votes against Decatur's 116, Decatur was still able to maintain its position, owing in large part to this discrepancy. It is unknown what the Venables made of these developments, but they were affiliated with the Decatur-based Candler family, and Secretary of State Allen D. Candler ruled in favor of Decatur at the end of that year.
Mere days after stonecutters organized a strike across the company's several quarries at Stone Mountain, demanding 8-hour days, William Venable sent a letter to Booker T. Washington. Venable did not receive a response, but the similarities and differences between Washington's and Venable's works are notable.
Venable told Washington, "I have been so very interested in the progress of the colored race for years. We undertook to teach them to make granite blocks at our quarries at Stone Mountain and succeeded. We are having so much trouble with the stone cutters who come here from the east that we have made up our minds to attempt to teach the black people to cut stone. If we can do this, it will be a new field and a better one than most any other, and we can be independent of the labor organizations. Then he makes a few requests. First, he asked for Washington's advice, wondering if this plan would be feasible. Second, he asked him to raise funds for Venable's financial interests.
Clearly, Venable saw Washington's work as an opportunity for financial gain, attempting to exploit Washington's view on gradual advancement of black people over generations, as well as vocational training and industrial advancement. Even though Venable proved unsuccessful in gaining Washington's full support, this interchange reflects how Venable manipulated the public to enforce the illusion that he was acting in the best interests of the Stone Mountain community, when in reality, he was only thinking about his own political and economic interests.
Their relationship extends beyond the letter, though. In 1895, the Cotton States and International Exposition, planned in part by Venable himself, opened with a speech from Booker T. Washington. Now known as the Atlanta Compromise, this speech became Washington's most known piece of work, advocating for a social segregation between black and white people as long as the races could come together for industrial purposes, claiming, "In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand, in all things essential to mutual progress." He also advocated for the gradual advancement of black people in society. Overall, his views seem to align with Venable's, at least on the surface, and may have contributed to the black stonecutters' willingness to accept Venable's policies in Stone Mountain. But Washington was a more strategic individual than most recognize. Thus, for both Washington and Venable, their motives cannot be distinguished merely by listening to the speeches or statements they give to the public. Further analysis of their actions and interactions are essential in understanding how and why they act.
Georgia has owned Stone Mountain since 1958 after purchasing it from the Venable family. However, in 1998, the state hired Hershon Family Entertainment, HFE for short, to manage the park and increase its profitability. HFE is a company that runs many theme parks across the country. In the agreement, HFE paid the state an annual fee to hold operating power over Stone Mountain Park. HFE's main goal to maximize Stone Mountain's revenue was to keep all income streams within the park. In other words, HFE wanted Stone Mountain to become an all-inclusive vacation spot instead of a mountain at the heart of a charming town. Think Disney World. Most people who visit Disney aren't traveling to interact with the city of Orlando, but rather the theme park itself. In 1998, HFE shifted the main entrance to Stone Mountain to U.S. Highway Exit 78, built 2 years prior during the Olympics to accommodate for traffic. This change intentionally routed away from the city of Stone Mountain and towards the increasingly commercialized park.
Look, they've done a great job. They've done a great job, and when you go in there, you're not coming out here. You know what I mean? Because there are things that keep you in there. They have food, they have entertainment, they have enough, and the distance is not walkable. You know, like I used to think, oh, well, we can just grab people from the park, but it's not walkable. Once you go into the attractions, you literally have to drive a little bit to get back into the downtown.
HFE opened food courts and shopping districts inside the park to further contain the cash flow of its guests.
Stone Mountain has devolved into a series of tourist traps, firework displays, and laser light shows.
While these changes were certainly profitable for HFE in the state of Georgia, they had tremendous negative effects on the local Stone Mountain communities. According to business owner Rory Webb, Hershon Family Entertainment virtually strangled the town through its policy of hogging revenue from tourists. Following the increased Black Lives Matter movement in Atlanta and the subsequent backlash against Stone Mountain's tumultuous history, including being a meeting place for the KKK and being home to the world's largest Confederate memorial site, the park saw $27 million in losses from 2019 to 2020, a 56% decrease in revenue. While some of the losses can be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic, the park's management still viewed it necessary to undergo a drastic modernization to alter the public perception of Stone Mountain. According to Stone Mountain Memorial Association executive Bill Stevens, economically, we can't stay the way we are. Change is inevitable. We can either take charge of it or we can be defined by it. In 2021, HFE and the state of Georgia ended a 23-year partnership, stating increased political controversy as a chief reason why. HFE was replaced by a startup company called Thrive, founded by Michael Dombrowski. While this change appeared as the turning of a new leaf in the history of Stone Mountain, it was merely a political stunt to revive the park's reputation. According to his LinkedIn profile, Dombrowski worked at HFE for 18 years as a high-level executive, and he was in charge of operating Stone Mountain since 2019, 2 years before Thrive took control of the park. Furthermore, the following quotes from Thrive's mission demonstrate the use of political buzzwords and jargon to win public favor.
Everyone is well aware of the dark history of Stone Mountain Park, and we cannot change the past. Dombrowski often tells his employees that for every ounce of hatred there ever was in the history of this park, it is our job to bury it with 1,000 tons of love. We do this by loving our guests, loving our community, and loving our employees.
The name Thrive was not chosen lightly. It is the concept that embodies Dombrowski's approach to business enterprises, to the people who comprise them, and to the communities which they serve.
To understand the heartbeat of Thrive and its mission to grow goodness, you have to understand the legacy Hirsch and Family Entertainment leaves at Stone Mountain Park and the desire to continue that legacy. Over the past 23 years, HFE has invested significantly in the employees and community around Stone Mountain. HFE has a strong commitment to its values.
Yes, this community that HFE and Thrive claim to uplift is the same one that has been intentionally sabotaged and neglected for maximum economic gain over the last century. Furthermore, in its tenure operating the park, Thrive has only perpetuated the economic greed demonstrated by HFE. Complete with restaurants, hotels, golf courses, shops, and more, Thrive's vision for Stone Mountain makes it so guests' needs are met entirely within the park, which limits potential interaction within the larger Stone Mountain community.
Throughout the process of digging up research from obscure internet archives, following our fearless friend Andy through abandoned trails long forgotten by most, and forming a narrative that has not come near any historical canon, we all gained a first-hand understanding of how extreme the erasure of history can be, even in the cities where we grew up.
Ignoring any historical relevance of the mountain and only focusing on the tourist attractions is harmful, but so is crafting a narrative that emphasizes the mountain's ugly Confederate past while ignoring the lived experiences of Shermantown residents.
Through creating this documentary, we have forged our own path, both literally and metaphorically, becoming more responsible students and citizens of Georgia.
But this isn't about us. This is about a pattern of capitalist manipulation just as present today as it was in the past. You might ask yourself then, what can be done to improve the future of Stone Mountain?
So I think there's a combination of the city partnering with, developers, investors, in order to provide grants or some level of funding to get over that initial hump to get these projects off of the ground. I think once you get it off of the ground, there's a high demand to have things like shops and restaurants here in the downtown. But I think once the city starts to really build itself up, we become an asset, and then that conversation is so much easier.